everybody. This is Karen Elkins, and we have the distinguished Dale Pond from the SVP, Sympathetic Vibration. What's the P stand for?
Sympathetic Vibratory Physics.
Physics, that's what it is. Okay. And I've known Dale for a while back. He actually even owns a school building in a small town in Colorado where he's got a lab, a library. He ships out books, even Walter Russell books. He's been a Walter Russell, a Keely, a Tesla, et cetera, fan for eons and has explored across all of them. So as he says, he's studied across many fields, but because he actively synthesizes them into a unified vision. That's a true mark of a polymath, not a scattered curiosity, but an integrated master in all of these things, whether it's physics, history, philosophy, music, engineering, and more importantly, even the spiritual sciences, where he brings all of these things together. So Dale, thank you for joining us. Thank you for coming on, because with our course, which we're doing, the 12 home study course of the Walter Russell, there's still some curious things that are left out those for us to sort of like deep dive a little deeper. And one of them is the idea of the sphere and the cube, which you said I wrangled you in to have a conversation to enlighten our collective audience a little deeper maybe than we've been able to do. And I'm so grateful for you. So do you want to tell us a little bit more extra about your sympathetic vibratory physics and what you do in your beautiful location?
Thank you for having me.
You're welcome.
And I'm kind of glad to be here. Sympathetic vibratory physics is a branch of physics that was created by John Worrell Keely in the 1870s and 1880s and early part of 1890s. And he got sidelined by the bad guys. And all of that was buried. And it was all lost. They labeled him as a fraud and just destroyed his life, destroyed the man. And I stumbled on his work in 1984, and I said, oh my God, this is what I'm here for. And I dug into it, jumped into it with both feet, and it's been a tremendous journey. And come to find out that Walter Russell saying the same thing Keely was saying, only in different words. A slightly different, well, sometimes a grossly different perspective. So, and the more I dug, and I've been digging 50 years now, and come to find out that what they're talking about has been known since ancient times, ancient Egypt, before that, the Indian, Vedic stuff. They're all talking the same science. But when you hold their science up, comparing it to standard conventional physics, there can be some great differences. There's some similarities, but there's great differences. One is standard physics approaches cosmology from the gravitation. Everything's based on gravitation and the speed of light and black holes and all the crap they throw into it. But these guys, this ancient knowledge, which has been brought forward mostly through Keely's work, and Russell's trying to translate it all into a modern perspective, is based on vibration. Everything in the universe vibrates. Yeah. So logic says, well, if that's true, and it is, then all we really need to study is the physics of vibration. It's just like Russell said, in the wave is the secret of the universe, or paraphrased. So that's what I've been doing. I've been studying vibration. Like, even Tesla said, if you want to understand the universe, study vibration. And so you can come at physics or cosmology, spirituality, religion, whatever you want to come at from. Vibration answers the questions. So it starts with the same question I had in 1984 was, well, what the heck is a vibration? And I come to find out that it's not what they teach in school. It's not what they, no. It goes a lot deeper. It's really a beautiful thing once you get it. But like you were saying earlier, you got to spend months, if not years, getting the background knowledge. Once you have that, well, then your eyes just pop open and you can see it. But because of our lousy education system and all the interferences we have in society today, people don't really have that luxury unless you really truly want it, in which case you will ignore everything and go for it. But it's just the way it is. We've been denied the knowledge, even the most basic pieces. And I've been putting the basic pieces together. I've been looking for the universal principles and laws that runs everything. And once you have those, well, then you could look at this, you could look at that, look at the other thing, and you have insights into what's actually happening, not what the academia or preachers or whoever is trying to tell you it is. No, it's a lot more beautiful. It's a lot more rich in meaning, and that's what I've been doing.
Yeah, I think it's a nice bridge between understanding the science as well as understanding the cosmology and the spiritual part, and how it is actually an operating system even within you, which oftentimes gets overlooked. It's the same principles that our own bodies, as above, so below, so within.
When I say universal principles and laws, that means it's applicable universally.
Yeah, it scales.
They apply in your personal life, in your social life, in your so-called religions, and everything.
Yep.
When you see those, I mean, SVP, I call it SVP, Sympathetic Vibratory Physics. SVP has the ability, or holds the promise, that it could resolve all these religious conflicts. Because when you look at it from this perspective, there's no difference. The only difference is somebody's opinion about it. And that's all these old sacred texts. Somebody's opinion about these, they must have visions or something like Russell had. And they tried to write it down in their language in those days, which does not include technical things like the word vibration or longitudinal or any of the words that we use now. Well, you take the perspective that we have today, which are very rich vocabularies. You go back and read that, like Genesis, and the beginning was the void. Well, there's Russell right there. The void, the stillness, the quiet. And you build upon that. They got part of it right, but then they started mixing in all that crap that they did, dogma and doctrine.
Yes, I know what you mean.
I'm not a respecter of dogma and doctrine.
So let's go back, because there's a fundamental question that has probably been the most challenging for the group that we have that have been studying the study course. And that is the idea of the cube and the sphere in the universal mechanics and how it works according to Russell's stuff.
Yeah, well, the cube and the sphere I'm still sorting it out. I don't have all the answers. I've looked at the cube and the sphere for years and years. And, when he says something like that, he says nature uses only two shapes to build everything.
Mm-hmm.
Show me the cube in nature. And unless you look at a diamond or some crystals, you're not going to see it. Or a pyrite.
Dale, that's exactly what I was thinking about, because I was really working about where do we see those straight lines?
Yeah.
And the only place that I was completely thinking of it was, I was going to say, in the crystalline structures, which he actually talks about the 7,000 points of light. But those are the crystallizations, or I'm going to call it potentially the platonic solids, which form in their geometry, and in, like Kepler talks about, when they arrange and rearrange, right, in their frequencies. Would that be correct?
Yes and no.
Okay. So tell me the yes and the no. Give us some insight, because that's why we have you.
Well, the cube and the sphere are basically symbols.
Okay.
Of two concepts. And the cube represents the radial universe, which is, see, you got to know the background. I'm talking stuff, and if you don't have the background, you don't know what I'm saying. same problem they had. So this might slow down a little bit. The sphere represents the radiant expansive energy, which starts out as a point. That's his Keely's neutral center, or Russell's void, or fulcrum, or any of the many synonyms he used. And the cube represents the boundary. So this energy radiates out from this point in concentric spheres. And when it reaches that boundary, who knows what defines that boundary, but he's using the cube to illustrate it. It gets reflected back. First, you got the radiant energy that's expanding away from the center, right?
Mm-hmm.
When it meets the cube wall, which is neutral, it changes the polarity of that radiation such that it goes back to the center, where that's a syntropic energy going to the center, and it's entropic, or chaos, going out in the radiation form. And that's pretty much his rhythmic balance interchange. And he's using the cube to illustrate how some of that works. But you got to go into the nature and character and dynamics of, okay, what are these two motions? One going out and the other coming back in. And as you learn about those, then you get into his heartbeat idea that he talks about. And we discover that, yeah, something like that.
We have toys.
Yeah. So we need these toys because they help us learn, like kids with blocks. And you'll find out that those are the only two motions at the foundation of the universe. And he represented them in those drawings about the male
And the
female image. That one right there. So you go, that line right down the center is your neutral line.
Right.
And we have long waves, like red light on the male side and blue short waves on the female side. And they have different characteristics. They do different things. Different colors have different actions in the material world.
James, stay there for a minute, because there's a lot of things that are sitting in there that most people might not recognize. And one is, when I look at the coils going out, one, the red or the blue, which are matching like chemistry would be, each one of those would be considered a different lens. And every different lens will create a different part of the optic wave. You call it dimensions. So if you know what I'm talking about, different dimensions within that light sphere of wave boundaries. Here's your little boundary for this one or that one. But each one is creating a different chemistry, a different shape of light, a different intensity of light. Would that be correct?
Yeah, all of those are different density. If you use the word density, you'd be close. Okay. Because depending on the density, you have higher or lower energy levels, different kinds of refraction angles, and all kinds of things. That's why I say these pictures are really simple, because he's trying to convey the simple idea of this polarity, the duality. But when you start digging into it, then it can get as complicated as you want to get it.
Well, I put it this way: the guy is hot, and the girl's the receiving end of it, right? So yeah, and she's the one who creates life, and he's the one who gives it. He's the one who gives the sperm, and she's the one with the seed. It's no different than a pine tree dropping, and its seed goes to the earth and grows another one, and then another one, and then another one, just kind of like we do.
Yeah. There's all that. It's the regeneration principle, Russell. Yeah. And however, in the cosmic polar discussion, we have these two forces. One goes in, one comes out, and they're reciprocal.
Right.
They don't act individually. So the energy going in is the life force. Now, the human being has multiple dualities within its being, within its structures and functionalities. I had an engineer here one day visiting who I admired. He's a very capable engineer. He's not academic, but he's very capable, and he's built businesses, whole businesses. And he asked me what the Syntropy is. And I tried to explain it to him. I says, well, look at these trees outside in the yard. The trees are pulling in the material that they need, water, air, sunlight. They're pulling it into their center, which is the core of the tree. And they're turning that into the substances that it needs to grow itself. It gets bigger and bigger and bigger. It'll reach a certain point where it's mature and it says, okay, I'm done. And it starts to rot, goes back to the earth, disperses back into the earth. Well, that Syntropy is that life force that brings all that stuff together, creates life. Life is building itself. And when it dies, then it disperses. It radiates back out into its environment where it all started.
You know what you remind me of, Dale, when you say that? Like a tree, what happens is the water literally climbs up the tree to nourish all the things. And science can't figure out if like Newton says everything falls down, how is it actually literally going up? And this principle actually explains it.
Well, it doesn't explain it, just kind of shows it.
I like the picture.
It's a metaphor.
Yeah.
You have to go into Schauberger's work.
Yeah.
Start to understand that. And now that guy's tough because he wrote in Old German and somebody translated into English. So we've got to deal with the errors in translation and whatnot. But he talks about that and he relates it to diamagnetism. And he says there's this levitative force.
Okay.
That comes into play. And we could get sidetracked on so many things. But anyway.
You know what? I'm going to say this. It does relate because even with Schauberger, if people don't know who he is, you should look him up because he was a naturalist and he observed so many things in nature. And it was so profound. And even though it may seem different, he still has the one side of the river is hot, the other side is cold. You got the mountains, you got the desert. You still have a lot of the same principles that Russell actually has.
Yeah, well, he said in the wave, the wave has knowledge of the universe. So when you start understanding what is a wave, start digging into those dynamics, which is to say the dynamics of the neutral and the dynamics of both poles. And the deeper you dig, the more complicated it gets. But if you hold to those three principles, going inward, neutral, going outward, and they do that back and forth, back and forth, back and forth.
They oscillate.
Yeah, and you keep your feet on the ground, and you can start seeing how some of this stuff works. My presentation, which we may or may not get in here, as the cube and the sphere, was my effort to. I saw the neutral one day. I mean, one day I had this vision, and I could look around, and everything I saw contained this neutral, which science today calls scalar potential. Other scientists would call it the Dirac sea or the meson sea. It's this energy around us all the time, but it can't be detected. It's neutral. So being neutral, there's no motion to it. You can't measure it going from here to there. You can't see it, you can't measure it, but we know it's there. All the great mathematicians in the past 100, 150 years identified it. They said there's got to be this source, capital S source, from which comes all these activities that we perceive as physical life. Male and female, birth and death, whole 9 yards, comes out of those three principles. And so I was trying to fit the concepts of the scalar potential or this neutral or the void or the fulcrum I mean, there's 100 synonyms for that. Religions call it God. I mean, it's everywhere present. Can't see it, can't measure it, but if you disturb it in a certain way, you get certain effects back, like with prayer, meditation, and the same thing happens in the physics of it. I call scalar physics. Bearden went into it quite deeply, and it's all the same thing. It's the same thing. You've seen winged solar discs from the ancient Egyptian. Well, the circle in the center is this neutral source, and the wings are when the source is differentiated into the multiplicity of the feathers, meaning the universe. They knew all about this. And if you dig into the alchemy, oh my gosh, those guys are all over it for centuries. Yeah, there you go.
Thank you, James.
Yeah,
Awesome.
appreciate that. That's a really nice image too. So it symbolizes the three principles. The neutral is the center, the circle, which is the sphere in your cube. And as you first differentiate it into two, so you got two sides. And then you further differentiate it. Differentiation is like refraction, where you refract the sunlight and you get multiple colors.
Mm-hmm.
Same principle, same principle. So we get the multiple feathers going out, which are the multitude of the materiality that we experience. And they've known this. I mean, they knew it so well they carved it in stone, trying to leave us a message, but we didn't know enough to know what they were trying to tell us.
You know what this reminds me of when I think of the wings in the center and I see the cube? It reminds me of, I don't know if you know who Richard Merrick is. He did an interference theory where you have the two waves that come together, like the two wings that come together. It's the left and the right, and it's the interference that actually, through those ripples, create the reality of energy and force working together. And it also reminds me of Marco Rodin's work. So,
Well,
and then they go back to the cube and the properties inside that. So, yeah.
yeah. Everybody's working on the same thing.
Yeah.
We're all circling the same bush.
Yep.
Which, by the way, the I am, that's the sole source, your self-identity, because we access the same mind of God. Like in Genesis, God said, well, he didn't say, it's a mistranslation, because there was nothing to vibrate. He had no vocal cords. He was just there in this void. Well, what was there? Mind.
There we
God's
go.
mind, the mind of God. So he thought. And then that divided in the night and day, left and right, male, female. And from there it descended, it refracted more and more, till we've got what we got. But they didn't have these terms. And whoever wrote that, they didn't know physics or anything. They're just saying what they thought they saw. Like Russell was drawing what he thought he saw in his epiphany or whatever it was. So he tried to express it in 2D imagery. I think he would be excited out of his mind if he had what we have today, 3D animation.
Yep.
You could show everything he says in perfect detail and total simplicity so anybody could understand it if you have the time and the knowledge to create these 3D animations, which I don't have. I've done a few, but tremendously difficult work for me. Other people do it naturally. You know, we need those kind of people to work on this. But if we keep in mind that the cube and the sphere are mostly symbolic of these two motions, in and out, and then you can go into these other drawings that he's got. I've isolated a few, which I sent to James, where he starts to show how it breaks down into music notes and the colors and all these different things. Then you're in the vibration, because that's it. That's a good one right there. See, in the center is that yellow line. That's your neutral. And as it refracts out, you start getting a fifth and then the octave, and then all the other notes. By the time you get to third octave, all the notes are present.
You know, Dale, if there's people to at least observe on the very top image, they can see from that it's a lens in a sense. And inside it are rings of light.
Well, he's showing those concentric rings as neutral inertia points or planes. So you could superimpose those two left and right circles onto the interior side of a cube. Be the same thing. And in a cube, you'd have 6. So what do you got? You got 3 axes orthogonal to each other. And I also provided that drawing in there somewhere too.
You'll find it. He's
yeah,
all over it. I mean, James is he's been doing the study course with us, so
yeah.
It's a blue image, and there's you'll see the 4 squares or the 6 in there. And you know what always reminded me when I see that image, it reminds me of a lighthouse turning, because you can see that all of those lenses then must this has always been confusing. So this is my question to you. They're rotating or pulsing together, creating geometry or what? So maybe that's a confusing part that I've had confusion. When you want to explain that one? How do those work in symphony? How did those 4 and the 6 work in symphony?
Can you bring that image back, James, so we can...
There
it is. That's the same thing in a different way.
Yeah, I knew we'd find it.
Yeah, see that's on the right side.
Mm-hmm.
The 3 lines joining the 6 vortex images. Okay, Russell talked about gravity shaft. Any 2 of those opposite vortices will come together to center, rotating in opposite directions, and they will create an explosion which radiates out at 90 degrees to that shaft. Okay, so imagine the same thing happening on all 3 axes. So you wind up with, there's also a drawing in there somewhere, shows 6 vortexes combining together into a cube. And it's because of the rotation of all that stuff. That's where you start getting into Keely. Keely was far more mechanical and scientific than Russell was. And he shows how those motions spin around, you know, the Merkaba idea.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, same thing, only on atomic scale.
Okay, I was thinking because it's probably where the
there you go.
idea of fusion comes in, where there's really no atom in the middle of any of there's no nucleus, but when the 2 sides come together, the hot and cold, they create the fusion, no different than what happens in a volcano.
Wow.
You're thinking about that?
No, because that's kind of a little bit scattered.
Okay.
The what I'm trying to describe here is really complex. It took me months to get the pieces figured out to where I could actually talk about. I even did a 3D animation on YouTube someplace where it shows all 3 of these shells rotating around each other. And that centralization and those etheric envelopes or encapsulations around the center is what we call an atom.
Okay.
But there's nothing there. It's just ether in motion. Ether, by the way, in SVP terms, is all the quantum forces and energies of the quantum world that the quantum physics people deal with. Let me explain that, because so many people miss it. I even missed it for the longest time. Keely developed hard mechanical machinery that harnessed this etheric force back in the 1870s. He made hundreds of machines. Nobody knows how many machines he made, hundreds of them. And they worked. Well, in his time, established science, maintained that an atom was indivisible. You couldn't break it. It was just a hard billiard ball type thing, and that was it. And Keely comes out and says, no, you can divide the atom and you can split it and you can get all these particles out of it and all these energies and everything. So he preceded quantum physics by 50 years at least. But the science, the dogma, says, no, you can't do that. The atom is solid. You can't split the atom. That's his disintegrator. The remnants of it's been all stripped down. And so the science academia refused to listen to anything he had to say because he's doing the impossible. You can't do that. Atoms can't be broken. So the ether, they knew they figured the atom was a solid thing and there was nothing smaller than an atom, but they knew there was something else out there. And so they just labeled it ether after the Greeks or whatever, just to give it a name. If you go back and read all those guys, which I did, old Victorian science and everything, they're all saying the same thing. They were describing the quantum world that we now today are quite familiar with. But they were stopped because you can't break the atom. And Keely was doing it routinely in his shop, 30, 40, 50 years before, Rutherford and all those guys discovered that, there is a particle smaller than an atom, which was in the 1890s. And
James, go back to the image for a minute. Can we go back to that image? Yeah, there's a reason, because Dale's got one of those in his place.
Yeah. Actually, I got two of them here, but I started out years ago and I said, well, if I want to understand Keely, I got to build something. And I decided to build this, replicate it, to replicate it. And we made the first one in the winter of 95 and 96. And learned a lot. You really do learn a lot when you got hands on. And since then, I made 7 of them.
Wow.
And there's the one.
James, you are amazing.
And we've learned a lot. I still work on it every single day because there's things about it I don't understand. There's things about, why did he shape this type of metal in that shape and size and dimensions and everything. So we're going through the whole thing, nitty gritty, trying to understand why he did this and why he did that in our standard physics terms, because it's a mechanical device. It vibrates mechanically, acoustically, just like a music instrument. And yet there's more than that going on.
It's got a field.
Oh, yeah, you felt it, right?
Oh, yeah, I did.
Yeah, people can feel that field and say, oh, my God, what's this, And we've had people getting healed around it and all kinds of psychic phenomena, mental phenomena, health things, people getting healed, And so we had to start to try and answer those questions too. How can this thing be healing people? Well, that's not what's going on. That's what we see. Russell talks about the difference between what we see and sense versus what's actually going on.
Mm-hmm.
So what was actually going on is this thing has a certain field. And when people get in that field, they say, subconsciously, they say, I recognize that. I feel it. Oh, man, that feels good. And if they go along with it, they heal themselves or whatever they got going. I've seen people get there and they start to feel it. You can see it in their faces. They start to feel it and then they pull back. Oh, my God, I'm not going to do that. And it's kind of funny, but it's tragic, too. It's some people were hurt by what they thought was love. And this field is nothing but love. And they feel that again and say, no, I'm not going to go there again, which is, sad. But but other people go along with it. And if you allow yourself to be in that field, it corrects your thought patterns, as Quimby would say. And the support for the illness that you have disappears just like that.
Well, here's a question with the sphere, because that's basically a sphere in there, and the shape, which is your center point.
Yeah.
And you're saying it has that resonance of God, the resonance of love. Then the shape of the cube and the sphere along with its frequency, makes it's a beautiful transmission.
Yeah, we live in a dual world. We live in the God world where we're part of that and everything, and we know what love is. And sometimes we get these epiphanies, enlightenments like Russell had, and I've had a few. And on the other hand, we live in this physical world. And that's what the cube represents, the physical world. So those two shapes is the duality of the universe in his graphical representation, an artistic representation.
When we look also at the cube, he does have it where you see the stacking, the 3 stacked, which then reminds me of the different lenses. So in other words, each octave of the 9 octaves that he talks about has sort of a growing pattern to it. No different like we have a growing pattern and a tree has the same. It's an electrical discharge pattern, which is like your hand, big, medium, small. It's the way things propagate.
Well, yeah, you could use music theory as a method of getting a better handle on what you just described.
I'm not a musician, so go for it.
Yeah, well, the physics is pretty simple. That inner center, neutral center, is the same as your fundamental in any octave of music. Your keynote. And any musician knows this. It will mirror itself in the first octave, which is a doubling of the frequency, a halving of the wavelength. So there's your 2 mirrors.
Ah, okay.
If you study the overtone series, which is just the arithmetic of how this happens, the next note they form is the 5th, which is halfway between the 2. Just follow me on this. And if you go up the next octave, see the frequencies of the keynote and the octave, if you mix them together, they will start creating partial tones between them.
Okay.
Okay. In that drawing that we had where we had the color music notes, it shows that. But if you don't have this background, what's an overtone series? What's the arithmetic behind it that creates, see? So all those notes are contained in the center tone. He's got G picture here, which is blue. Depending who you study, it could be a different note. So just take it for what he puts up there. It's the yellow center. It's actually a white light. There's no color to it. And if we have that would be the keynote. And on one side we got the octave, the other side we got the other octave. And those numbers, those frequencies, added and subtracted from each other, creates all the intermittent tones. It's just pure arithmetic.
Okay.
That's all it is. That's vibration. That's how vibration works. So you can take a violin, for instance, and if it's tuned to the note G like he has, that's your fundamental of your violin. And if it's structurally built to resonate with that note, you got this powerful source of sound. And by touching the string in different places, you get all the other notes. It's all in the fundamental. Everything's in the fundamental. And the fundamental is the same as the void or the sun, symbolically speaking, or the Dirac sea or the scalar potential or God in Genesis.
Let me ask a question because you get a picture in my mind. If you've got like the male and the female coming together, and that's the 2, and then you go back to the 5 with the circle of fifths. Well, that's also your golden ratio where everything literally spins from. So the 2 come together and literally spin out, and you create this star. Like we're a star shape.
Yeah, all of that. It's all the same. It's all the same.
I know, that's what I think, but we don't always see how they all say the same thing, but we're talking a different language.
Yeah.
All the same thing. And what you're saying is, let me ask a question. If all of those different notes, would that be the difference between a Dale and a Karen? those unique notes that we're kind of like tuning into, and why some people you vibe with and some people you don't?
Simplistically speaking, yes.
Thank you.
However, we each have our own chord.
Right.
You know, and I set out years ago to identify what this chord was and how could we determine what it is, and I came up with this method, and I can determine people's chords. Only up to 10 notes. That's all I can do. I do have a project on the back burner to create a math computer program, an app that anybody can kind of see their own chord. They can hear it. They can do music, and with AI, it can write its own tones, and it gives you insights into who you are and why you do what you do. All that's been figured out. All this stuff's been figured out by somebody somewhere. And I just happen to be a prolific reader, and I read everything. Well, no, not everything, but I read a lot of stuff. And all this stuff is in there, and you can tie it all together. And I can create this great app. But the only thing I can't do is clone myself and get more time in the day to do all this stuff. I just can't do it all.
Would that be like, there's a lady by the name of Sherry Edwards, and
I
she
know.
can hear your voice and she can tell you what's wrong with you because you're either off on certain chords or whatever, right?
Same principle.
Okay. And there was another guy, Robert, and he was in a magazine I did years ago. Same idea. He could tell again what your tone was or whatever, or what that thing was sort of like sending out to the universe.
Yeah,
Yeah.
and this program I'm planning on, it gives you all these insights into your personality, and you can match them. You got a boyfriend or girlfriend, you can compute both and match them together. Well, it matches here, matches over here, but over here you got some work to do.
No, I would assume that would tie into astrology as well, because most people think of it as sort of whatever. But when you look at the way the universe spins and the way the planets are aligned with their harmonic growing, as Kepler recommended, and we spin, we're always going through all of these different octaves. We don't look at it that way, but it is exactly the same as looking at it as cymatics, because as we dance through, we are like cymatic plates, where things in the vibration, the frequencies are constantly changing in the universe, and we're dancing to its tune. Literally, we live in a harmonic symphony of sound and
Yeah,
vibration.
yeah, the universe is musical,
Yeah.
and we live in that. And the rhythms, there's cycles and rhythms all around us all the time, and that's what this program does. It deciphers many of those.
Mm.
And going back to astrology is in two major parts. First is the mathematics, which is pretty exact. I mean, NASA can land a satellite on Mars. I mean, they know how the mathematics of the planet motions is. Can't
Hmm.
argue that. The second part is the interpretive side. What does it mean? When there's a square or a triangle, what does that mean? So people have intuited that and came up with these, and compared it to people's lives, over many years and years and years. And okay, a square in Mars or whatever is X. And well, you can make use of all that. It's all there. It's right there in front of us. All these pieces are that's all I've done all these years. 50 years I've collected pieces, and I put them into my wiki, svpwiki.com, because I was looking for the commonalities
Right.
between all these pieces and all these theories and all these authors and people who wrote about this and studied it for their whole lives, gave their whole lives to it. Well, what are we're finding them. And it's beautiful. It's just really, really beautiful. I sometimes use a metaphor of an orchestra,
Mm.
because it's all musical. You got 100 or so people sitting there, individuals, each playing a different music instrument. They're not
Yep.
They're only linked through the harmony that they feel and hear and know and understand, and the sympathy of the pitches. A sound over here, if it's the same sound over here, they're in sympathy. And all the components and parts of your life are those players.
Yeah.
So your job, your mission, if you choose to accept it, is to bring all these pieces into this grand harmony so that your life is beautiful and loving and harmonic, and you don't have a clarinet player over there squeaking and squawking. You know, you got to deal with that guy, you know, and bring him into that's what a pitch pipe is for. And a pitch pipe is so important because that sets the tone, the fundamental, from which everything else comes.
But that when I go back to Walter Russell's work and I look at the lenses going out, where you are basically a reflection of who and what you are, but it's also octaves, so it's all sound. And it is geometry, because I think one of your things is, what is the relationship between geometry and consciousness in the model? And it all is a reflecting back.
Well, the lenses idea, I'm pretty sure, refers to the ability of a lens light going through one side, the concave side, will expand out on the other side. Light coming in from the outside in focuses to the center.
Right.
There's your two forces.
And you know, Dale, they make a perfect circle when you put them together, and you have the female one, and the male on the in the center.
Well, they're emblematic or symbolic of the two principles we keep talking. Everything comes from those two principles. Because first there's one, which is God, the mind of God, and then he thought. Well, Keely said, and he backed it up with experimental work, that's the perfect image right there, that thought he called the great exciter. Why did he do that? Because he could think at his machines, or he could draw a symbol on the wall, and his machine would start to operate across the room. So it was his thought that he had embedded in that symbol that triggered the refraction of the one scalar potential, or God, or void, or whatever you want to call it. I mean, on my wiki, I got 100 synonyms for that. And I mean, that's a general figure. I don't know how many I got. Got a lot. And so God thought there was nothing there but the mind of God, and he thought, and the universe came into being through these principles that we're identifying, like the overtone series and how the harmonics mix and match, they add and subtract from each other, and they create all these tones. Well, everything's a chord. There's no, you know, atoms. The human being's got the physical, emotional, mental, and spiritual main subdivisions, and they're all operating on a different frequency range. And those notes through the harmonic tuning, the octave tuning, if they're all in tune, the human is whole and healthy. But if they start thinking a nasty thought, oh, that guy cut me off, or, you know, whatever, that's a discord. And the discord enters into that chord and disrupts, like a squawking clarinet player in the orchestra. You know, you either get rid of him or you teach him how to be in tune. That's the way it works. If you study Quimby, he explains all this stuff, and it's so simple. You got to read it and read it. You know, all this stuff. You got to. We have to change our base thinking, our base consciousness, and we can only do that through time. Unless you're like Russell, and all of a sudden you see the light and you get it all together all at once. Well, even then, it took him his lifetime to try and explain it to the rest of us.
And I think sometimes that's where he's pulling from here and here and using different words and different vernacular, and it gets confusing. But when you go explore all the different little ways, it comes together. But it takes work to actually pull the pieces together, and it takes research.
It takes effort. You know, you got to read it and read it and read it, meditate on it, think about it, draw, just draw, doodles, whatever. And your mind will eventually shift from this linear physical materiality we live in to that higher level of consciousness that he talks about, the genius level, where you know things.
Yeah.
And you're just not thinking about them, but you know them. And it takes for most of us, it takes a lifetime. I spent a lifetime, and it was only in the past few years that I finally saw what he was trying to tell us. And once I saw it, oh my God, he wrote this in all of his books, in everything, over and over and over. But until I saw it, I couldn't see it.
So what was the one epiphany that you're talking about that you finally had that big aha?
Well, it was two of them, but the recent one was I was just walking through my living room and just hit me like a 2x4. I could see it. All of a sudden I could see it. I could see it in the books and the bookshelves and the art on the walls. It was everywhere. It's in everything. So that neutral center, which is some call God, has to be there, or that thing or item wouldn't have a body and structure.
Huh,
Because
okay.
it's all built around that source. So as you, Bearden called it tickling the Dirac sea. So as you tickle that neutral, as you stimulate it, as you think, you get out of it. It's like the lamp, Aladdin's lamp. And we don't realize that. And the great thinkers of today, like Bob Proctor and those guys, they figured that out. It says you get in life what you are, which means what you think. So if you're thinking nasty thoughts, you're gonna have a nasty life. If you think of loving and harmonic and gentle and kind, that's the life you're going to have. If you think about prosperity and everything, you're going to have prosperity. If you think, oh, woe is me, I don't have any money, and government, give me some money, and you're going to stay that way until you change that thinking. Yeah, I can tell you all about that.
We've all had our lessons in that one. Dale, in your work, there was some, you've explored many things, but since we're on this topic, you've also explored the work of Edward Casey.
Oh, yeah, yeah.
When we're looking at the idea of what Walter Russell talks about is how do you ignite that inner genius? That's where actually Kimberly and Ken came up with the name Awaken Your Inner Genius. Yeah. It's like tap in.
Yeah.
And it was like, it's not because you get that inspiration. It's like tap in.
Yeah, if you believe you're ignorant, you'll stay ignorant. Yeah. I could say a lot of stories like that. We could sit here all week, But so a guy named Maxwell Maltz wrote the book Cybernetics.
Mm-hmm.
And I read that when I was 15. And that stuck with me so tight I couldn't, So as you think, that's what you are. And who was it? James wrote that book, As a Man Thinketh.
Oh gosh, yeah.
He explains it perfectly if you settle into the rhythm of his writings and what he's trying to say to you. Our normal school-based education is not sufficient to understand a person like that, or like Casey, or Russell, or Keely.
Mm-hmm.
You have to work like crazy to do what Russell said. We got to stop thinking, stop sensing everything, and get to where we know things. And a thing I've seen over the years, I mean, it's everywhere, is people look at Russell's drawings and they get focused on the drawing. They don't ask, well, what is he trying to tell me through this drawing? Because that's the meaning, and the meaning is the higher mind. But just looking at the pictures, I'm not going to get you anything. You got to ask, hey, Russell, what are you trying to tell me in the picture? And it'll come to you.
Yep. I do. I'll do a lot of the reading before the thing, and then I do the videos, and then I'll go and lay down, and then the aha moments come, and the pictures come in my mind, and it tells me what to do. You tell me what to do. So yeah.
That's the proper method to do. I used that for years and years and years. And when I want to write something for the public, I'll sit quiet and say, okay, what do they need to hear? Or, what I ask inward. What do I do? What do I say? And that it just flows when I do that, the writing. And here in the past year, when AI came out. Do we need to get into that?
You can. I've noticed you used it. I see the graphics and stuff in some of the things you've been doing. And I've been doing it too. So it's been very helpful to just like zoom through some things.
Oh yeah, it's the greatest tool mankind's ever made. If you use it as a tool, it'll suck you into its own, an AI program out of the box is ignorance personified, and especially woke ignorance personified. So you got to train it so it starts talking back to you the way you want it to talk back to you.
Mm-hmm.
When you do that, I said I spent 50 years gathering pieces, put it all in the wiki, and I said, what am I going to, I got to synthesize this stuff. Well, I can drop Russell's book on AI and a Keely book on AI and a Schauberger thing. I said, synthesize all this together in such a way that people can understand what these people are talking about. And in a minute or two, you got it.
Yeah. Here's the good thing about you, though, Dale. And the same thing that I have to do. Sometimes it doesn't always give me the right answers that I know better. And the nice thing is, at least at the age that we're at, because you and I are pretty much the same age, we have enough knowledge to know to correct it. And it'll actually say to you, oh, I never thought about that. That's an interesting idea. That was pretty profound. So, I mean, at least we're in the part where we actually can say, well, that's not quite right. Let me give it to you this way.
Yeah, I do that all the time. And I write the thing and I'll say, hey, you left out this. And I'll point to a page in the wiki and say, go read this page and then rewrite it with that.
Right.
And it fills it all out and it gets closer and closer to, a better interpretation, because that's all it's doing is interpreting somebody else's writing. But I had a guy visit here a few months back, and I didn't know him. He had his son with him, and we chatted for a while. And he went home, and he sends me a 600-page manuscript
Oy.
that describes his work. Well, I'm not going to sit there and read a 600-page manuscript. Unless it was Keely or Russell himself.
Right.
So I dumped it on AI, and it says, here, summarize this whole book. And zing, in 2 minutes, I had a summary, and I sent it to the guy, and he said, oh, this is the best summary I've ever done, I've ever seen on my work.
Thank
But
you.
that's because I had spent months training my AI,
Mm-hmm.
right? And it didn't work like that in the beginning. In the beginning, it was a joke. I think, this is a joke. So I quit using it for months. And one day I had an engineering problem I wanted to solve in the shop. I don't know this. I don't know anything about this stuff. Oh, okay, I'll ask AI. Explain how this part works and everything. And it printed all the engineering, everything about this thing, the mathematics and the whole 9 yards, which I couldn't really read. I said, oh my God, this thing, it's like having the world's greatest engineer and philosopher sitting right here at my desk. So yeah, it's a powerful tool. We got to learn how to use it.
Yeah.
And it can help us, and it help us a lot. I can go through the wiki now and summarize everything these people said about ether or you name it, and start to get pictures, better pictures.
Yeah.
And if you don't let the AI slide, like you were talking, you catch it. And you say, oh, we forgot this and you forgot that, and it's not quite like that. And it'll sharpen up.
Yep. Here's the one thing. Because we're getting close to an hour, but I want people to understand one more thing, because this is an interesting one. It is in the beginning of crystallization of light, units into which man calls solids of matter. So in that crystallization, still's the square.
Well, the first form would be a tetrahedron and then a cube.
Yeah.
And then it follows the mathematics out. And what geometry is an association of ratios of one dimension to another, one to another edge. So if it's cubed, then it's all cubed,
Right.
And so it's these ratios. What makes music? You got all these vibrations. You got 100 people out there making all this noise, and the conductor stands up and sounds the pitch pipe, and then everybody sounds the same tone, brings them all into harmony. What makes music music is not that single tone. It's all the other tones that they play in relationship to each other. It's always about relationships. In geometry, we call that ratios, proportions.
Mm-hmm.
So the ratios and proportions are the dictating factors in, for instance, Russell's periodic table. It's the ratios of those densities and energy contents.
And the pressure conditions and all those things.
Yeah, and that's what matches. So he broke it down into 9 steps, to 0 in the center, and 1, 2, 3, 4 negative, and 1, 2, 3, 4 positive. So it's the ratios of those quantities, and we can quantize it. That's the beauty of math and arithmetic. And so that's where you get the fifths and the fourth and the third. It's a ratio of 2 tones to each other.
Mm-hmm.
In the Keely materials, he used a lot of triplets. He was sounding 3 tones together. Well, that's the basis of that is his 369 philosophy theories or ideas, whatever you want to call it. And it's the ratios of those 3. It's not just the numbers themselves. It's how they interact with each other. It's how a man and a woman interact.
Yeah.
Not just that there's a man and there's a woman. Well, what's the value? It's how they interact. It's the value. Same thing with, so that ratio and proportion is the bottom line for geometry and what fits into all this. And it's a fascinating subject. If you want to get in.
And I would think that's where the cube would have its role.
Well, proportion.
Yeah, that's what I'm thinking. And the division, but it also takes me into the concept of fractals and the holographic nature of the universe. I mean, all of that to me would make, and then when you take the cube and you spin it, it becomes a sphere. That's what the illusion of it. It becomes that spherical thing that creates the tornado, that creates the eddies, which create.
Well, now you're mixing the drawing as opposed to what does the drawing mean.
Oh.
That's gotta be careful of that because we trip ourselves up all the time. We want to believe what we see.
Well, let me ask a question with the cube part. He's got the 2 cubes, and then he's got the light bridging between. It goes like this, Dale. Oh, wait. So like this, and then it goes like this, and then it goes like this. So it's not like it stays in the cube. It like travels out of it, and then it's like the wave goes like this with it, and then it's kind of like it traps like a particular ratio of that wave, and then the next ratio of the wave, and then it captures the next one.
Yeah. Well, what's missing?
Yeah. Well,
what's
that's
missing?
what we have to.
Yeah. Russell had a tremendous difficulty doing what he did. I mean, you look at what he did, and you're just amazed at what he did. Every corner where cubes meet, where they're stacked together, and the corners meet,
Mm-hmm.
that's a neutral center.
In each corner of the box.
Of every there's 6 corners on a cube. The 7th is the center, neutral center.
Right.
He's got one drawing which I didn't supply you because I didn't think we're going to get into this, where he has cubes interlaced, cubes inside of cubes,
Mm-hmm.
and they're offset half the length of a cube. So every corner of every cube is part of the neutral center, the 7th neutral center of every cube. All of those neutral centers are neutral. That means they're all sympathetic to each other.
Okay.
That means no matter what you do over here, it's going to be experienced over there. That's where they say God knows everything. Well, he does it through sympathetic vibration. And that's what today they're calling it. They're trying to call it quantum entanglement. But because they're all neutral, they're all the same chord, if you will. And so no matter what happens anywhere in the universe, the rest of the universe knows about it instantly.
If you're in that frequency or just in general?
No, I'm talking about neutral centers.
Okay, neutral center. Okay.
Now, if you were one with, like Russell did when he had his enlightenment, he was one with that. He had the same mind in him that God has. Same thing Jesus did when he got baptized. He adopted the mind of God instead of his mind. So he knew it all, just like Russell knew it all. Russell said, I know what it all is now.
Mm.
And that's what happens when you sync with the neutral. That's what the dinosaurs are doing. When they got this neutral center, that's nothing but love because it's all sympathetic. Everything's sympathetic when you get to that level. Sympathetic does not mean feeling sorry for somebody. It means feeling the same as.
Okay.
All right, you're in love, universal love. That's all it is. It's a sympathetic vibration, which is the foundation of what I've been studying all these years. So when you let go of your divisive, mechanical, analog, linear thinking, and you allow yourself to be absorbed into that oneness, then you experience what Russell did and Christ did and a bunch of other people did. And you know, at that point, you know, there's no questions. And that's why I said in the beginning, SVP has potential, correcting a lot of misunderstandings out there.
Okay.
You know, opinions. That's all everybody's got is opinions. Well, what the hell's an opinion? Nothing. It means nothing. That's why I don't trust anything anybody says, including Russell Keely and all these other people. So show me how and why. Those are my two demands that I make on everything, especially AI. I trained in the beginning. I said, don't tell me all this crap. You know, it's opinions from their programmers and God knows where else they get that information from. But don't tell me those opinions. I want to know how and why. And it started coming back with some meaningful stuff. You know, don't give me people's opinions. I mean, review them all and everything, but let's distill it down to what are the least common denominator, what they're saying. And it works. And all of a sudden it says, well, Keely said this, and Russell's saying that, and Schauberger's saying this other thing. And so it pulls it all together. So we keep distilling it down, let go of the dogma and doctrine, because what are we seeking here? Truth. Yeah.
That's what we're doing.
Yeah. There's too many opinions out there, right?
Boy, these days, aren't there? I mean, that's what's creating so many issues in the tissues these days. Holy cow.
You know why? Because they lost their connection between their whole mind. They're just dealing in the outside physical. They're just looking at the lines on the drawing. They're not questioning, well, what's the meaning? Why did he draw this like he drew it? You know, what's in there? And unfortunately, our school systems are teaching that method, you know, black and white, good or bad.
Yep.
So when they get done brainwashing in the 12th grade, they're brainwashed. They can't do anything. They can't think. And the other thing I want to point out that was really helpful to me in the beginning was syllogisms. If A equals B and B equals C, then it's obvious A equals C. You don't have to go investigate and dig around. I mean, it's a simple logic they use in computer programs, you know, if then else. And if you start teaching yourself that and learn and thinking like that, you can't help but go really, really deep, and your genius level goes up and up and up because you no longer believe in somebody's BS. Because you can go A. If A is A and it equals B, which B is B, so it just sorts itself out.
Yeah. Yep. Well, it also teaches you, because here's the thing that I, even listening to any news or anything, is where are they trying to lead me? And instead of actually giving me a straight story, they're always telling me a story with a twist to have me think in a particular way. And that drives me crazy because you can't just get the facts. You get in a fact with an opinion, and that drives the herd. And that's not a good thing these days, is what I see.
That's where the I am comes into it.
Yeah.
You say, no, I got integrity. I expect integrity back, and I will have integrity back. You're not going to bullshit me.
Yeah.
You can try, you can scam me and everything, but when you sit back and you use your logic, syllogisms, and all these things, you can sort through it pretty quick.
Good. Yeah. To me, I can filter pretty. I can filter pretty quick. It's like, whoa, that's like, ooh. So anyway.
Yeah, we can get to it. I mean, we have, Casey said this, and a lot of people say it. We have the same mind in us of the God mind.
Mm.
That's why every now and then we get epiphanies and we see these visions and everything, because that's it seeping through our egos, which is trying to protect itself all the time. But when you're relaxed or whatever, that gives a chance for that to come in, because it's always coming in. It's a metaphor where Jesus says, I'm knocking all the time. Just open the damn door.
Well, you know what makes me think of James? Are you back there? Do you want to come on screen? Because James, if he's there, I know he's got to be. There you are.
I'm still here. Yes.
I know you're here. You're running the show. But James is a very bright and curious soul, and he too had some thoughts. Like he'd been curious about the cube. Did we answer any of your questions, or is there anything you want to ask?
Yeah. Well, I definitely understand it a little more now. Thank you, Dale. I did have a question when you were talking about the neutral centers. Was this the image that you were referring to?
That was the one I was thinking of, because it jumps from one to the next. So
yeah,
that's what I wanted explanation on. Thank you, James.
Well, the sympathetic connections is these red lines between the centers. It's a vibratory phenomenon, and it's an esoteric link, which means it's super high frequency that's connecting all those dots. And he's just trying to, God help what Russell did, he tried to draw that. And that's very good if you analyze it and you match this drawing with his other drawings of where there's multiple cubes. And all of a sudden it'll dawn on you, everything's linked through their neutral centers, because everything has its own neutral center. And they're all the same neutral centers because they're all sympathetic to each other. There is nothing in the universe. Let me rephrase that. There are no things in the universe except the neutral, which manifests in these many different ways. We call it hydrogen or carbon or tree or animals or whatever. But the only reality in all of it is that source, that neutral center, that God point, the fulcrum or the void, whatever you want to call it, whichever synonym you want to use. That's the real reality. And Russell talks about that a lot. And Quimby talked about it, and Casey, they all talk about the same thing. The alchemists, you look at their drawings, and I think I included an alchemical drawing in that collection of slides. They all pointed out the same identical thing, and it goes back to that Egyptian winged solar disk. It's all the same.
Oh, okay. Now I see what you're saying with the feathers and the wings and the wow, okay.
They're just a myriad of manifestations of this one,
the center
reality
of the one. So
yeah,
if you see that solar disk in the middle of that drawing, and you go back to that previous drawing, and you see each one of those red dots at a corner, okay, that's your solar disk, that red dot. And what's going out to the left or the right is the wings.
Wow. This is helpful. I have seen this image so many times that had no idea where to start looking. Obviously, the red lines lead you somewhere, but I'm sure many people who look at this, they don't know where to. What does this mean? Where do I even begin?
James, that's the one I was wondering, is how does it jump from one box or one thing to the other? That was the picture that I was thinking of that was confusing to me. So the fact that you picked that one out was like, awesome. Thank you. Yeah. We're on the same page.
Yeah, well, you got to have all these pieces that we've been talking about in your mind, and then you can see it. Because he just tried to pull all those different pieces together, the cathode and the anode and the transverse waves versus the longitudinal waves, and it's all there. I mean, he's picturing all of this, but it's up to us to educate ourselves enough. Okay, this corner is a neutral node, and it's also a cathode, and then we got the anodes over here on the blue line, which is a negative. I shouldn't use the word negative. Syntropy is the red, and blue is the entropy.
But it's the up and down wave. Now I can actually see where the blue line is, and you can see the red line, and it's still like the wave.
Yeah, it is a wave.
Yeah, exactly. But that's how but actually, when you actually look at Wikipedia and you see a wave, there's the one that goes like this and this, and the one that goes like this. So if I actually overlaid that on top of that, I would go, oh, okay, that's not, but he's got so much more going on in there dimensionally. Somehow you kind of almost get lost in it, but that makes sense.
Well, that's why you got to train yourself to identify each of those symbols.
Yeah.
The target shape patterns, whether it's plane to the screen or orthogonal to the screen, like the blue ones. And you start to piece together and you say, oh my God, he's given us the whole picture here of how the universe is sympathetically linked.
Yeah.
He doesn't use that term. That's okay. He uses the love term. He uses, other synonyms, and it's all the same. What you look at it as harmony condenses to the center, discord expands away from the center. So there's your music expression, and which is why I adapted the term syntropy and entropy. Syntropy comes to the center. Entropy is chaos, so it spreads out, mutually repulsive away from itself. To get away from all these metaphors, the male and the female, and what the hell are we talking about? So those two terms are specific, they're explicit. You got energy coming in, which is your life force, your centripetal forces, implosion forces, cavitation, and then you got the explosive outgoing radiant forces. That's it. That's all there are. And then you can start breaking it up into the music notes and the colors and everything, because now you understand what we're talking about. If we keep using those old metaphors or synonyms for duality, male and female, yin and yang, we get lost in the dogma doctrine attached to all that. So we set all that aside and let's come up with our own two terms, which they're legitimate, legal, lawful terms. Syntropy exists, recognized by science. Entropy, they use it all the time. In fact, science believes so much in entropy, which is the death side of the cycle, which is that other keynote thing you have, the Syntropy thing, describes this life force, which doesn't really recognize.
Yeah, that was I think it was last week's, the week before that's lesson was talking, there is no, it was the 7 laws or the laws of thermodynamics that you have also as a PowerPoint, where there is no death. There's just the cycle.
Just cycles, just keeps going on and on and on. It's just a switch. It's instead of having all of our attention on the physical here in this life, when you die, you lose all that. And you go into the mind state, spirit state, mind, spirit. There's another synonym. And that's all it is. It's just a different way of experiencing life.
That made me think one time, Dale, is because we're on a continuum. They call it refolding or whatever. And it's, we come and we go, just like a tree. We get reborn, and our seed connects and collects the things that we've learned. So your curiosity coming into this lifetime, accumulating the knowledge of many, many things, has probably been many lifetimes doing it. And it's like, for you, it's just the best thing. You could never, you're one of those people that could never do anything else. And right. And so it's a beautiful thing, it's accumulation of actually making an investment in every lifetime to enrich it and to become more full, to become enlightened in many different ways. So it sitting around just watching TV is not the optimum when you could actually be exploring and adding and accumulating just juicy bits. It's amazing.
If you look at experiences in your life, like maybe you get some negative experiences, if you switch your thinking from woe is me, how did I get in this mess, you say, oh my God, what an adventure we got here. We can see how this works out. Goes from a victimization to no, I am me, and I'm going to explore this. So then it becomes an adventure, it becomes exciting, becomes a learning opportunity. And there's things like that. There's little tricks of how we look at things.
Yep.
That can turn your life entirely around. I got a friend like what you described. The guy is just super intelligent. But he won't do anything. I have tried for 40 years to get him to do something. He's got all these ideas. He wants to do this, wants to do that. But anytime I come up with a suggestion or an idea, instantly comes up an excuse why it won't work. So he doesn't have to go do it, see? And he just won't budge. And he's got his heels dug in, and anchors thrown out, and he ain't going to change. And I look at that and I think, oh my God, it's not a waste because it's his life, But from my perspective, I've been all over the place. I've done more things than most people even think about. And it gives me a richness.
Yeah.
Or a wisdom. I've already done it. I know what that's all about, And with a guy like that, he ain't gonna budge. He just doesn't have the courage or boldness or whatever it is.
He's taken a rest in this lifetime.
Yeah, that could be it. Let's turn around and look for the silver. He doesn't have to go out and go through a tumultuous life. He can just sit there and study his books, and it's pretty much all he does. But he's a genius. You don't know anything about books, he knows.
Yeah, wow. I understand that. I think I have a son who's kind of like that. Anyway, is there anything you think we missed that you would like to share? One thing I would like them to know, Dale, is that they can sponsor you through Substack and other things that you have. You want to tell them about that?
I opened a Patreon account.
That's okay.
Because I spent years and years and years and years posting every single day on Facebook some of this knowledge, whether it was a Keely quote or Russell quote or whoever, whatever. And I never got a penny. And I said, that ain't going to work. I'm just, I need to be paid for my 50-year investment. So I set up a Patreon account. You can get in for nothing. You can't get all the bennies. You can sign up for $1 a month. What can you buy for $1 today? I don't know anything you buy for $1 today. Or you can sign up for $5. And those two tiers have different categories of benefits. Yeah. I put my main effort into the tier 2 people, which is the $5. I mean, a cup of coffee a month.
Yeah, no, I signed up.
And a few days ago, I had this idea that, for years, I've thought about, listen to this. We have articles, original articles, magazine, newspaper articles from Keely's time. And one of them mentioned that there was this 90-foot long, cigar-shaped airship.
Okay.
That he was building behind his shop, and it was all metal, so it's not your hot air thing. And Keely had invented some airships that he could fly around Philadelphia and whatnot. And so, what happened to that submarine airship thing? Never found another article mentioned it. He had the knowledge to fly it.
Wow.
levitated, and he said he could go 500 miles an hour through the atmosphere. This was in like 1890. And he was surrounded by wealthy people, Bloomfield Moore and John Jacob Astor and a few other people. So he had the tech and he had the financing. And Astor wrote a very curious book. It's titled Journey to Mars and Back.
Oh.
So you take all these odd pieces, I've found over the years. Well, who said they died? Keely knew how to heal anything. They had the money. Why didn't they just take that 90-foot flying thing and leave? Go to the moon, colonize the moon. Why didn't they go to Mars? Maybe they did. It's all possible, may not be probable, or it's a science fiction. It was an idea. I was trying to fit pieces. That's what I do, trying to fit pieces together. And I said, gee, that they could very well have done it. So I started writing a series of like TV episodes. Okay, let's presume they did it, and it's all science fiction, it's all made up, but it's founded in these pieces. And they got together one night, and secretly planned to do all this, and then they go to the moon. They settle the moon, and that's the first year. About year of episode, 18 episodes. The second year will be them going to Mars. They're already talking about it in the last episodes, and it's kind of cool, It's an adventure story. It's like Jules Verne type.
I was thinking the Nautilus when you said that.
Yeah, what do they call that nowadays?
It was the underground, the submarine.
Like funk something.
Oh, steampunk.
Steampunk, that's it. Yeah, steampunk. It's kind of like that, Jules Verne. The hull is riveted together, and it's brass and big parts and crap. And it'll be like that. And I love adventure stories. God,
I can see the smile on your face.
Yeah, I love adventure stories. So this is the adventure story. And it's real people, real events, real technology, and we're teaching SVP throughout all these episodes.
Yeah. Well, people probably don't know, but you have an amazing library.
I do have a pretty good library, yeah.
Yeah, you do. Oh, there it is.
Yeah, there you go.
Find it, yeah.
And,
thank you. Thank you, James. That's really sweet.
Yeah, and we're getting a number of people signed up, and it's working. I mean, it gives me an opportunity to feel good about myself and all this work I'm pouring out there to the public. Oh, I'm going to get paid for it.
It's always nice thing to be able to pay the bills at the end of the month.
Yeah, it does, and it helps me feel appreciated that there are people listening to this. There's people who want to learn it, and there are people who are learning it. And
I remember when I met you years and years ago, and I came and visited you at your place, and you looked at me and go, "You need to learn that thing about balance." I never forgot that.
Really, I said that.
Yeah, and that was that balanced interchange.
Yeah, rhythmic balanced interchange. The heartbeat, breathing in, out. It's taking in and putting out. So I took in for 50 years. Now I'm putting out.
Yeah. So, well, I want to say thank you for being on the show. Maybe there's another topic at another time. Let me know. Maybe you will come to me and I won't have to be digging for you. I'd be happy to put you back on.
If in your lessons there, people come up with all these questions.
Yeah.
Make sure they ask questions. You have to ask questions. If they're not asking questions, they're not learning.
Right.
Have them ask questions, write them all down, and send me an email.
Okay.
And maybe I can wrap something together, pulling pieces together and come up with something.
Okay. Very, very, very grateful. Thank you so much for joining us. And I pulled together a little piece for the end of this. It's short. And so I'm going to let James play it. And it's because people asked us, how does this work relate to your life, and why might it be structured this way? So this kind of goes into the resonance of why God does what he does and why we get in our life in those resonant fields. So James, do you have that? Oh, he's doing it. Thank you. It's a short one.
Mirrors and lens, the logic of God's universe, a cosmic feedback loop of light and emotion. We live in a universe not of random events, but of precision, one governed by waves, balanced interchange, and the divine logic of electric motion. Every judgment we hold is a signal seeded into our field. This emotional frequency becomes a note in the great cosmic symphony, calling forth reflections of itself, messengers cloaked in the roles of antagonist, ally, or mirror. Why do patterns repeat in our lives? Because they must. They are the imprints of our inner signature, our feelings encoded in light. In this electric universe, what we feel, we field. Our emotions broadcast a frequency that refracts through the cube-shaped lens of our own making. Why do patterns repeat in our lives? Phi, then, becomes a feedback loop of electric memory and mirrored experience. Every encounter, especially the difficult ones, echoes back a part of the story we have yet to rewrite. Until the energy is transmuted, it will return, like a wave seeking stillness. Russell taught that all motion is mirrored motion. Opposites seek union through rhythmic balanced interchange. Light divides only to unite. So too, our hurts seek healing by surfacing again and again, inviting us to rise beyond them, not to fight, but to recognize. That we live in a wave-based, mirrored universe where story, emotion, and thought are not separate from form, but the very blueprints of it. As above, so below. As within, so without. We are not victims of circumstance. We are architects of resonance. Let each repeated pain become a portal to awareness. Let the antagonist become the revealer of your own encoded light. And let your feelings become purified fields, clear signals of harmony, love, and creation. Because when the emotional field clears, the signal changes. And when the signal changes, the pattern ends. And when the pattern ends, a new octave begins. Reflections Mirrors Lens.
There we go. Gives
Yep.
people a thing to think about.
That's what we were talking about all evening.
Yeah, I thought that would be a nice close for where we were at. So I appreciate it. Thank you very much for coming on, and we hope we'll have you back.
All right. I'll be glad to come back.